Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, November 6, 2019 meeting of the Edina City Council. And there she is. Our temporary clerk. Our regular clerk, of course, was busy running an election and preparing for it, and we're giving her a little breather, and Director Benarott is substituting in for her. Director Benarott, would you do roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember Brindle. Here. Councilmember Fisher.
Here.
Councilmember Staunton.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. And for those of you in the audience who would care to join the council in saying the Pledge of Allegiance, please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, folks. We have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Manager Neal, is there anything you wanted to modify on the agenda?
There is not.
All right. Anyone else wish to modify the agenda? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda as shown.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to approve the meeting agenda as shown. Further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Community comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address council on a matter of concern to them? Yes, ma'am. Come on forward. And I think you heard Director Benarott. You'll have 3 minutes, and you'll get a yellow warning light when you got about 30 seconds to go. And
thank you.
then we'll be happy to hear what your concern is. And you can just
Can I
start.
start? Oh.
You can go ahead and start. Yeah, you got a free run here until that green light comes on.
My name's Claire Hahnemann. I live at 5725 Bernard Place. And Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, I'd like to bring your attention to the proposed road construction projects that are intended to affect the Melody Lake neighborhood. As currently proposed, the Melody Lake neighborhood would be split in half, with the northern portion undergoing road reconstruction during the 2020 year and the southern portion during the year 2021. Currently, the dividing line between the two projects is Grove Street. We all know that road and utility reconstruction are a necessary function of living in a civilized city. Unfortunately, the current proposal creates undue burden and hardship for the residents of this particular neighborhood that is disproportionate to the residents of others. There are, of course, trade-offs to any decision, but here I think the trade-offs don't make sense for those directly impacted, and this is why. First, Grove Street does not appear to be a natural divider in the neighborhood. It would seem more logical from a traffic flow perspective to divide the neighborhood 1 block south on Benton, which is a much more active thoroughfare. Second, the city seems to have somewhat arbitrarily decided to do 2 projects adjoining in 2 consecutive years, which provides an undue burden on the neighborhoods undergoing this road construction. I understand that the areas of work are planned based on available funds and that funds are available based somewhat on the needs of the city. Third, Grove Street has multiple bus stops throughout the stretch of Melody Lakes that will be impacted by this construction. Thus, for 2 years, the bus stops for multiple schools and all sorts of children will be directly impacted by this construction. The neighborhood has been undergoing a rejuvenation of sorts and is teeming with small-age school children of all years who have moved there quite recently. I myself have 2 children, ages 5 and 3. And they will only be young once, and we will feel the loss of biking in our streets and enjoying our backyard significantly for 2 whole summers. We all know that nice weather is limited in Minnesota, and these projects will extend from March to November from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., perhaps even longer if it's a rainy season. I lived through the road reconstruction a few years ago in the Morningside neighborhood before I moved, and I've seen the proposed projects, how they divert traffic and create increases in roads that are not otherwise meant for them. I believe as currently proposed, the streets throughout the neighborhood will become cut-throughs around Benton, and once patterns have been established, they are hard to change. I urge the City Council to reconsider the proposed construction timeline and instead to perform the entirety of the 2 projects in the 2021 calendar year. I, along with more than 30 of my neighbors, believe that this is the most reasonable solution for those who have to suffer through the road construction. It is inevitable and a necessity, but dragging it out for 2 years makes the burden unbearable. The dust, noise, traffic diversions, and inconvenience are more than unpleasant that they might seem on paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to leave your written comments with the clerk? You could, or leave them with Ms. Bennerat. We'll be happy to make them part of the record.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Ms. Hahnemann. All right. I saw another hand come up. Yes, sir. Come on up. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, good evening. Council members, good evening. I live in the same neighborhood as Claire. My name's Philip Sussman, and I live on the corner of Grove and Dale. I've got a little different perspective than Claire has. She's a newcomer to the neighborhood. I've lived there since 1981. We've raised 2 children there, both of whom attended and graduated from the Edina school system. Our daughter had a very positive experience growing up in Edina that she chose to raise her family in Edina. I've been active in the Edina Athletic Association, coaching for over 10 years. I only mention all this is to confirm my commitment to Edina. I believe that of the many factors that make a community great are the welcoming, progressive people who live there, a nurturing school system with high academic standards, and the city's infrastructure that is second to none in the state. This is why, since 1981, I voted affirmatively for every tax levy and bond issue. I say all this to hopefully establish my credibility and commitment as a citizen of this community to discuss the inequity of the Grandview Melody Lakes proposed water, sewer, and street improvement project scheduled for 2020 and 2021. As an Edina citizen and resident, I'm obligated to accept making the sacrifice necessary to improve the city and neighborhood. I know and accept that one sunny spring morning in 2020, I will awake to the sound of heavy equipment creating a new Grand Canyon outside my front door. We will not be the first neighborhood in Edina or the last to experience the noise, mud, inaccessibility, and major inconvenience. There is also an economic impact of severely affecting the sale of homes that are in the middle of basically a war zone for not 1, but 2 years. This may sound like a privileged first world problem, but consider that through some planning anomaly, we get to experience the same experience on another sunny spring morning in 2021. Compelling the Melody Lake residents to endure 2 phases of construction over 2 years is not only too much, but it is not fair or equitable when compared to other major construction projects in Edina. I am in the process of having my fellow residents sign a petition who so far are unanimous in their demands to have the city of Edina defer the North of Grove 2020 project and combine it with the 2021 South of Grove phase, making it a 1-year project for the entire Grandview Melody Lakes neighborhood. And thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Mr. Sussman, thanks for coming in. All right. You want to make those comments part of the
Sure.
record as well? You could hand them to Ms. Director Bennerat. Yeah. All right. And when we set this matter for a public hearing, you folks should make sure that you come back, and because I think one of the things our engineer is working on is trying to figure out how to address some of these concerns that you've all raised. So, is there anyone else that wants to speak to the council about a matter of concern to them? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Roberta Castellano, 4854 France Avenue South, Mayor and City Council. Last week on October 30th, I filed a public data request concerning land use guide changes related to the 2018 Comprehensive Plan update. This week, I submitted a copy of my data request to the City Council using the online submission form, and so it does appear in tonight's online council packet. In my request, I mentioned that the city has been editing the draft comp plan, but not disclosing the edits. And then, so today I noticed that a red line version of the draft comp plan has now been posted online under the link name, quote, October 2018 Comprehensive Plan, red line, close quote. So my question is, Does that document, the red line document, represent all of the changes to the draft comp plan as compared to the March 6 draft that was presented for the public hearings held on April 24 and May 7 for the comp plan? And if not, what other changes have been made? And that's all.
Okay.
I would give you a copy of this tonight. Well, Jennifer's taking it tonight, is that it? And, but I made some edits on it, so if I can just email it. Could I email it to Sharon? Or should I?
I think so. I think it'd be
Okay.
appropriate, or Ms. Garsky. Yeah,
Okay.
either one.
I mean, I'd
And
like
then-
to include it in the, you know, where it gets posted online as a handout. It's just, I can't mail this
Okay.
copy in. I
All
mean,
right.
I can't hand this copy to you tonight.
And we'll maybe have a interim answer on your question here yet tonight. We'll see if we finish. Anyone else for concerns of residents? All right. We'll close that portion of the agenda, the community comment portion of the agenda. And Director Teague, is this something you need to do some research on? I think Ms. Castellano's question was basically, can we, if we look at the October 2019 red line version of the proposed comprehensive plan, does that encompass, does that show all the changes that have been made since there was a version of it on March 6, 2019?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's go to the consent agenda. Is there, manager's comments to community comment. We had some folks here a couple weeks ago with some concerns, and Manager Neal is going to address the community comments that were made 2 weeks ago. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. We had considerable comment at our last meeting on October 15th. Our first comments were offered by Ralph Zickert, and Ralph was there to address some concerns about illegal tree removal on around the southern periphery of Lake Cornelia, and some concerns that a previous speaker had made. So he didn't ask any questions, but he just offered some comments to you about that. Then we also had Roberta Castellano was also here and asked a number of questions about the comp plan, some of which have been answered by by Community Development Director Teague, and also by the red line version of the comp plan that is up on our website now. We also then had 5 different speakers who spoke on really generally on 2 officer-involved shootings. And the Aiden family, representatives from the Aiden family and representatives from the Quinones family both spoke. And starting with the Aiden family, there was, if you recall, there was a question posed to the council about why they hadn't received the information that they had requested in a data practices request, and that they had submitted on July 8th. Our response to them was that we weren't sure about whether we had received it or not, but the next day we checked and we had. And so we do want to acknowledge that they had submitted a bona fide request for data, and that we did not handle it the way that we handle these things typically. And we have expressed our apologies to them for that, but more importantly, we provided them all the data that we have on the subjects that they were requesting. We provided them in 2 batches, one on October 18th and a second on October 25th. These are provided in batches because of the volume of the data that's subject to the request. Oftentimes when people are making this request for the public data that's in a personnel file, particularly in a police department, it could be hundreds of pages of data. So sometimes these take quite a while to prepare because there's also pieces of it that need to be reviewed and redacted as well. So we don't have any dash cam video of that officer-involved shooting. So we couldn't provide that because we don't possess it. In the Quinones request, we have also provided quite a bit of data as well, this time in 3 batches, one on October 15th, the 15th, the 18th, the 25th, and November 1st, so 4 batches of of data that we've provided to them. If you'll recall, the council asked staff to meet during the meeting on the 15th. You asked staff to meet with the two families on Friday, the 18th, and we did do that. We had three representatives, two family members and one family friend from the Quinones family that we met with in the afternoon. The Aiden representatives from the Aiden family were not able to join us for that meeting. But at that meeting, we provided them with data, and we also discussed how and under what circumstances we would be able to show them the video, the raw video, portions of the raw video that were relevant to what they wanted to see. And we did do that. We discussed it with them, and we did show them parts of the video, the Quinones video, the video that we have, dash cam video, on Wednesday, October 23rd. Assistant City Manager Schaefer and Ms. Benarat were in charge of that, and they showed the Quinones family that video. We didn't release it to them, and it was for family only. We do stand by the direction that we had provided earlier, that when it's reaches the completion in the investigatory process and we get redacted video from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, they will do some preparation of that video, and then they will release that video because they'll do some redacting on it.
You might speak to the redacting issue. Why would it be redacted?
In some cases, there may be folks that are in this video that have reasons that they aren't going to be shown. They should not be shown in a publicly released video. There might be children or juveniles, and so there's some redacting that goes on in terms of blurring faces and things like that. So that's part of the process of preparing it to be released publicly, and we haven't done that yet. And I think that's a summary of our community comment from last time and what our interactions have been with the two families since then.
Okay, good. Questions from council members or comments as a follow-on to the city manager's comments about what occurred a couple weeks ago at our meeting? All right, thank you.
Well, just
Member Brindle.
Sorry, just a quick one to say thank you for doing that in a careful and compassionate manner. Hearing from these two families, they're good people. They're going through a really tough time. But in a lot of cases, it's hard to understand. It's particularly hard for them to understand. So I do appreciate that we were able to provide for them what they were asking for.
Yeah, and I think as difficult as the meeting was a couple of weeks ago, and trying to figure out how to be responsive to their requests, I want to compliment Director Benarat for finding a pathway to help them get some of the information that they were requested that was public in nature that very evening, and I think that helped a great deal. And I think, as Member Brindle says, the compassion that was shown by our staff and our police department in the process of meeting with the Quinones family and the Aiden. I guess we didn't meet with the Aiden family, but providing them the information that they were requesting was something to feel good about. So thanks. All right. We have a consent agenda with several items on it. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
We've got a motion second to adopt the consent agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the items on the consent agenda in a single motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And then we don't have, next on our agenda is usually special recognitions and presentations. We have none of those this evening. Although it does make me think, Manager Neal, we should make a quick note maybe to try to get the girls' tennis team and the boys' soccer team here that just won state championships.
And the girls' cross-country team.
And the girls, yeah. There was
Yeah,
one. I was going to say there was one more.
Good luck keeping up. You got to keep up. There's
Yeah,
three
and
now.
the girls' cross-country team. So all three of those, I think we should figure out a way to get them here and let folks appreciate them in a little bit different way. And they don't have to all be here at the same meeting, but I think if we could get them here over the next few months, it'd be great. Before we have another rash of state championships. All right. So we're on to public hearings, and we've got two public hearing matters tonight. Bob Wilson, our city assessor, has the first one, which is a resolution that, if approved, after the public hearing, would cancel a deferment of a special assessment and approve a reassessment on a piece of property in town. And Assessor Wilson, welcome.
Yep. Good evening, Mayor Hovland and council members. Back in 2015, the owner of the property at 6025 York Avenue South was approved for a special assessment deferral for a street reconstruction project. Since that time, the property went into foreclosure and was acquired by the current owners through a sheriff's certificate. The special assessment deferral terminates in the event of a sale or transfer of the property. Since the deferred assessment remains unpaid, this resolution would allow Hennepin County to cancel the deferred assessment and reassess the original levy amount. The special assessment payments can then be collected along with the property taxes beginning in 2020.
All right, good. Any questions on this matter for City Assessor Wilson?
Just one.
All right, Member Sutton.
When it's assessed against reassessed against the property, will it have the same payoff period as though it was starting from the beginning?
It'll be the same amount, 15-year payment, and the original interest rate at that time, which was 3.74% back in 2015.
Great, thank you.
Good. Other questions for Mr. Wilson at this point in time? All right, Mr. Wilson, stand by. This is a public hearing matter. Is there anyone in the audience? I'm going to open this up now for public testimony. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council on this matter? All right, I'm not hearing anything. I'm not seeing anybody coming forward. Is there a motion to close the public hearing? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved, sorry.
Second. Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Further discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then resolution number 2019-96 cancels the deferred special assessment and approves the reassessment for 6025 York Avenue, which is in the Strackhour Park B neighborhood roadway reconstruction improvement that was embodied in BA 411. Is there a motion to adopt that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2019-96. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then we have one more public hearing matter this evening, and that involves a request for establishment of a planned unit development district and potential preliminary development plan approval at 4100 West 76th Street for Aviation. And Community Director, Development Director Teague has this matter, and then we're going to have a presentation by Aubrey Gould of Aviation as well. All right, Director Teague, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members.
I see you're getting in the groove of the Movember thing along with the chief.
I am.
Yeah. You're the only guy that's not in the PD that's getting into the groove of Movember, or are there others?
I'm sure there are others. Maybe not as white, but
Very special.
All right.
This property is located in the Greater Southdale District. It's just west of France Avenue. It's the old Flight Time Studio site, just north of the LA Fitness. The property is currently zoned planned industrial district and guided in our comprehensive plan for office residential use. The council likely recalls that back in 2018, we amended the comprehensive plan just specifically for this site to increase the density from what the 2008 comprehensive plan allowed 30 units per acre. The comp plan amendment was to increase that density to 40 units an acre. And this is a look at the plan that was considered at that time. We did a sketch plan. That comp plan amendment has been approved by the Met Council and is in effect. So the site plan itself was designed around a couple of key elements. During that time, we were going through the design experience guidelines. They hadn't been finalized yet, but we knew some of the basic principles. We knew we wanted to create a north-south pedestrian bike type connection, kind of address that issue of how the site fits into the neighborhood. So they did provide this bike and ped path along the east lot line. They would dedicate that in an easement about 18 feet. There's also a mature stand of trees located back here. They wanted to preserve and protect them. So that's kind of the reasoning for the angle of the building. So this to go back. Also, the building is set a little bit further back from the street, and the reason for that is in order to get the underground parking. The site does increase in height as you move back into the site. So in order to make those grades work to get into the underground parking, the building was moved back. So this request requires a preliminary rezoning from planned industrial district to planned unit development. So within the PUD ordinance, that's our mechanism to require the affordable housing and that it is maintained long-term, and also a preliminary development plan. So the proposal itself, they have reduced the density. Again, the consideration was an 80-unit building. They have eliminated 10 units, so the proposal here is for 70 units and 35 units per acre. The building and site plan is generally the same. They are requesting flexibility through the PUD in regard to setbacks, primarily the side setbacks. A 50-foot setback is required under current code. Also, floor area ratio slightly exceeds the 1.0 requirement, and number of parking stalls. Based on the size of the building, 140 units or parking stalls would be required, and they're proposing 88. During the comprehensive plan review, we did do a parking and traffic study at that time, again based on an 80-unit building, and SPAC Consulting at that time concluded that the parking proposed would be adequate and that there was no roadway improvements needed to accommodate the development. So primary issue for consideration is the proposed rezoning to PUD reasonable to develop the site. Both staff and Planning Commission believe it is. The Planning Commission recommendation was unanimous. We believe that the proposal is consistent with the Greater Southdale District Plan. As mentioned, the use is permitted and it is within the density guidelines. Elements of that design experience guidelines have been addressed. They are providing a significant amount of public realm here in the front of the building and with that north-south easement and sidewalk that goes on the east side of the property. They would be doing a boulevard-style sidewalk along 76th and providing a sculpture potentially to pay homage to the previous Flight Time studio that was located on this site. Would also be located in that public space out front. We did have Mick Johnson from AFO do his usual review of the project and how it stacks up with the design guidelines. And so he has provided a number of recommendations. And the way we've conditioned it within the resolution for the council to consider this evening is for the applicant to consider some of these concepts and potentially make some adjustments as they revise their plans and come back for a final rezoning. Not a mandate that they must meet those requirements, but try to incorporate some of them. To go through some of those, within the design experience guidelines, we talked about doing some stormwater ponding, not just for this site, but along that entire, the rear yards of all the lots within that area. The difficulty here is that's the high point of this site. So to provide it individually on this site would be extremely difficult and add more cost to the project. Aon has indicated that should this area further develop with the adjacent properties and we can do some neighborhood ponding, they would be open to that idea and maybe even potentially providing an easement to that effect in the future. You can see he's also suggesting a reconfiguration of the buildings. It's essentially taking the two L's and just reconfiguring them and pulling them close to the street. In order to do that, the parking would be brought to the rear of the building. The concern that he had was providing that surface parking lot in the front. This also does add cost to the project overall, and the applicant will go through in detail to address some of these issues and provide an indication of how much additional cost would be brought to the project in order to accommodate some of these things. Again, it is part of the recommendation this evening. So continuing on, the project would provide 70 affordable housing units to help the city meet its goals with the Met Council. They are providing the underground parking, which is also a benefit for the PUD. Landscaping has been enhanced. Again, there's a significant public realm that's proposed here. We believe this would be a catalyst for further development within the area, and again, it's laying the groundwork for that north-south bike pedestrian path. Existing roadways and parking would support the project, and it would be a vast improvement over the vacant existing building on the site. So with that, staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval of the project this evening, subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in your resolution. With that, I can stand for questions.
Questions for Director Teague at this point in time? Anyone? Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for that thorough presentation. All right, is Ms. Gould here? We haven't seen you for a while. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I am representing Aon. I know you guys have probably heard this, but Aon is a long-term provider of affordable housing and has an organizational commitment to ensuring that their entire portfolio continues to be affordable in perpetuity. And so that's exactly what we're proposing here.
And Ms. Gould, would you give us your full name and business address too, please?
No, I didn't. Aubrey Gould. My business address is 901 North 4th Street, Suite 150. North 3rd Street, sorry.
In Minneapolis?
In Minneapolis,
Thank you.
55401. So we are proposing 70 units of housing, a 4-story building. 17 units would be 1-beds. I think it's just good to know rent-wise what we're looking at. 2019 rents for these units would range between $722 and $1,125. And to give you a comparison, an average rent for a 1-bedroom in Edina is $1,397. There will be 35 2-bedrooms within this unit or within this development. They're going to range between $1,125 and $1,350. The average 2-bedroom in Edina is $1,680. 18 of the units will be 3-beds. They'll have rents at $1,560. And so the average rent in Edina for a 3-bed just went over $2,000. So you're at $2,057 for a 3-bedroom average rent for a 3-bedroom in Edina. So we are really excited about this location, and I know you have the Greater Southdale Design Guidelines, and it's exactly these guidelines that are making this such a fantastic place to place an affordable housing development. So you're going to have future residents that are going to have connection to established amenities, most of these within walking distance. So over the course of my funding applications, I've had to look up the walk score for this particular site, and it's actually increased over the last couple of years that I've been working on funding applications. So it's actually at 69 right now, and that means that some of the errands can be accomplished on foot. So that's really exciting that it's increasing in its walkability. Residents are going to have access to higher performing schools, employment, supportive services, recreation, shopping, and transit. And so, as we know, not just your housing needs to be affordable, it's also these other things that really add up, and transit being one of them. So we're really excited about this space offering the walkability, the transit stop that will be affordable to residents. So speaking to the Greater Southdale District Design Experience Guidelines, like Carrie had said, they weren't in place entirely when we first came for sketch plan review, but we had the essence of it and the aspirations. And so I just wanted to point out that we might not be meeting all the quantitative thresholds for this plan with the proposed development, but we are including the desired experiences that are outlined. And so I just wanted to highlight some of those. So publicly accessible space is clearly visible and directly accessible from the public realm. So we have this really fantastic big lawn right in front of the building that's right in front of the bus stop. And so it's this really great space where both the public and the residents can mix and get to know each other. And then, as Carrie alluded to, we're really hoping to do some kind of public art within the space to tell the great cultural story that hasn't been told to the public. So we really want to make that accessible as well. And then just these paths that bring through that space that bring you either into that north-south bicycle and pedestrian path that breaks up the super block that connects the greater Southdale area and really allows people to go through the site, and then will ultimately plug into other neighboring sites that will have the same infrastructure, and then also bringing you in through that front door. And so as you go in that front door, we're looking at glass that you can see right through the back, so you have this really dynamic see-through pass-through in the middle of the building that really brings both the north and the south together. And then stormwater being a valued resource by making it part of the experience of the district. Visible as an amenity, allowing it to become a central part of experience of the site. And so I think with ours, we have a rainwater garden that is right in front of the front door that is right in front of the sidewalk. And so you have this very visible stormwater retention system. Then we'll also have under the parking lot as well, but a very visible stormwater system that the public can see. And then support a pedestrian experience first with storage of cars, not a focus. And I know that the Greater Southdale plan has spoken to this, that, you know, it wants to be suburban and urban, a great mix of both, and realizing it's going to be multimodal and that there are still going to be cars used, but really promoting bike and walkability and transit. And so I really think that we've been able to, you know, kind of balance all of those, really pushing just a small amount of parking that we need to really make that parking click for this development. So, you know, if people are dropping people off, they're visiting, or site staff, that small amount of parking could support that use, but we're really pushing it off to the side. So giving that stormwater, that rain garden prominence, giving that front plaza, front lawn space prominence as well, and really downplaying that small amount of parking on that corner. And then encouraging healthy habits living, particularly through walking. So again, great sidewalk connections throughout the site and that north-south path. And creating neighborhoods of activity, focal points of public activity found within each neighborhood. And so really hoping to do that through a public art piece that we can incorporate in this space and tell and kind of give, you know, a marker to this area that people would want to visit and check out and see that art. And I thought, you know, maybe it would be great if we had a transit stop there. And so could you mix both a public art piece and a transit shelter? So I'm having conversations. I've met with the Edina Arts Foundation and continue to have conversations about how we can incorporate some art to tell the story. And so I can go into more detail. I went into more detail with the Planning Commission about some of the issues that Mitch brought up with more of those quantitative elements that we did not adhere to in our plan. And like I said, with how the funding has worked with this, we kind of got the design squared away, we put numbers to it, and that's what we've been funding. And so at this point, we have over 70% of our funding in place, and knock on wood, we will have the rest of our funding in this month. And so any changes right now are not going to be funded changes. And so that's really going to be a setback to the project. And we're going to have to go out and knock on some doors for more funding if we were to make changes. And so at our last meeting, I had our general contractor put some numbers to what the proposed changes would be. One of those was doing a majority of brick on the front face. We had it estimated at approximately $350,000 of additional costs. If we were to shorten up the drive, we'd have to do a snow melt system. So we'd have about $55,000 in additional costs for that. And then kind of this rearrange of the parking, which, the drive-through on that corner, which actually really wouldn't work very well because there's a gigantic tree that is not ours, but it's on the neighbor's property, so we can't touch it. But that's why you'll see on the bottom, what would it be, the southeast corner, it's kind of got that little jog, and that's to go around that tree circumference. And that reconfiguration of parking and the drive aisle would add additional $394,000 in cost. So I will leave it at that and answer any questions you have.
Yeah. Let's get to the council members and see, does anybody have any questions for Ms. Gould at this point in time? Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank
Stand
you.
by. This is a public hearing matter. I'm going to open this now up for public testimony. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the council regarding this proposal from Aon?
I hope I'm not the only one. Good evening, Mayor and
Good evening.
council members. My name is Hope Melton. I live at 4825 Valley View Road in Edina, 55424. I'm speaking in support of Aon's Affordable Homes Project at 4100 West 76th Street. There's a serious shortage of affordable workforce housing in the city of Edina. When employees must commute long distances by car to get to work, it adds to an already heavy burden, stress burden for them and their families. It disrupts workplace schedules, creates traffic problems, and raises carbon emissions. There are compelling reasons to approve rezoning for this project, reasons having to do with its location near transit and services, its permanent affordability, the fact that Aon has an excellent reputation for construction quality and building management, and finally, that the children who live in these units will not only be able to attend Edina schools, but they will live within a high opportunity community that gives them the skills and support systems they need to succeed in life. Now, I understand that our architectural consultant has raised concerns about inconsistent adherence to the Southdale Design Experience guidelines. While he recognizes the importance of affordable housing to rebalance equity across our community, he also recognizes the importance of the guidelines as a tool to quote, create a cohesive space that establishes a sense of equality among diverse buildings and places. In other words, the buildings and places with these guidelines reflect the rebalance of equity that we're striving to achieve in the community. They reflect it physically. He asserts that the guidelines to be effective must be enforced uniformly for all new development, quote, regardless of the economic or social intention. He's arguing, as I see it, that both market rate and affordable housing projects must meet the same guideline standards regarding the primary criteria, including setbacks, that guide the creation of the public realm. While these are legitimate and important concerns, I would argue that market rate and affordable developments operate under very unequal circumstances, especially in regard to financing, and that if we are to succeed in our effort to rebalance equity in Edina, we must recognize those unequal challenges and treat market rate and nonprofit developers differently. In other words, to treat them fairly under those circumstances, in this very dysfunctional affordable housing system, you must treat them unequally. You must recognize that with nonprofit developers enforcing some of these guidelines will make it financially unfeasible to create a building with 100% affordable homes. I understand the challenge you face, but you faced it before and found your way to solutions that promote equity and diversity without sacrificing building quality or a sense of equality among diverse buildings and spaces. I'm confident you can do this again. I urge approval of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Melton. Anyone else wish to testify? Good evening.
Good evening. Arnie Bigby, 7621 Edinburgh Way, unit number 2110 in Edina, 55435. I sent correspondence to the mayor and the council members, so I'm not going to repeat myself with the points I made there, but this is my neighborhood. This is less than 3 blocks from where my condo is located in that Southdale area. And I'm just delighted to see that property there. When I was the recipient of one of the awards from the city, the Tom Moy Award, which has been quite a while ago now, and the photographer for the city, one of Jennifer's staff, said, "We're going to take your picture and get it in our Edina magazine." And he said, "You know, should we take it in front of City Hall, or where should we have that photograph taken?" We had the photograph taken in front of 4100 West 76th Street, because we'd already had the thoughts in mind that that was a property that was going to be affordable housing. And I think it's just, for me, it's just a great achievement for this community to have this property developed. And thank you for the continuing work that you're doing with this. It's not always easy. We've got a good partner in Aeon, and I think we're just going to have a great addition to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bigby. Anyone other than Mr. Bigby? Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Steve Brown. I live at 5528 Halifax Lane. I'm speaking in support of the proposed project this evening. I've sent you my reasons, but I'm going to speak them as well as write them. And the two most compelling reasons for me to support this project are, under the Aeon business model, these 70 units of affordable housing will be affordable permanently. I think that's just an enormous, enormous benefit that we really have to place high value on. Most of the affordable housing units that the city has recently approved are for units that will convert to market rate in about 15 to 25 years. I've lived in Edina for 20 years. It feels like it's gone by in a heartbeat. Frankly, I simply can't imagine being the person who's moved into a property that's affordable at the end of the 15-year time clock. They're told that their unit is no longer available to them, and they have to move out. I don't think we should pass up the opportunity to reduce the number of traumatic forced moves for families when the affordable clock runs out, and the number of challenging meetings for future city council members faced with the difficulty of trying to figure out how do we find new affordable housing for these folks now that their old affordable housing has converted to market rate. Half of these units will be priced at the affordable 50% AMI and the other half at 60% AMI. Most affordable housing is started at 60%. So there's a tremendous advantage here in being able to get those 50% at 50% AMI. I think this income level will include seniors as well as workforce folks, and I think that is an advantage for our diversity in our community and in that particular development. I know concerns have been raised about the relatively high cost per unit of this project. This cost is being met by TIF funds. I hope my first 2 points spoke to the very high value associated with this project. Regarding the use of TIF funds, given the reality is that we're running out of time on using those funds. We have seen some projects come forward, but not as many as I might have anticipated. And I think the clock's going to run out before we're able to actually access all the funds that we have access to. And I think that would be just an incredible shame. It's an excellent use of these funds. I urge you to approve the rezoning to PUD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone else wish to testify regarding this proposal? Okay. Hearing nothing, seeing no one coming forward, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Got a motion second to close the public hearing. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Questions for staff, for Director Teague or Ms. Gould or anyone else? I had one. If remember, Brenda? Go ahead.
Sure, I got a couple. I have questions in a couple areas. In one, so sustainability, I guess this question would be either for Director Teague or for Aon, but so solar roof, is there any, what kinds of green roof, what kinds of sustainability have you got going in the building itself?
I know the questionnaire was filled out. I might ask the applicant to address that, but they did fill out the questionnaire that's required.
Ms. Gould?
Good evening. So there is no solar at this point in time. It's something that we're still exploring. We tried to obtain some Met Council funding for it, and unfortunately did not get that in. But there's another avenue that I'm exploring right now. I know I talked to Tara about putting some infrastructure in place for electric charging station in the underground garage. We always do the green communities, which is a high sustainability marker through the affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do measures like that.
All right. And then parking. As I recall, on the drive in, there's the 10 surface parking places? Or
currently?
Yeah.
I don't know how many there are currently.
So
I think there's more.
So in the traffic and parking report, they talked about an additional 10 spaces if needed. Where would those spaces be?
So we have proof of parking within the plan, and so we've pushed a side of it to the far corner of the lot, and so on the other side of the lot, we could add an additional 10 stalls. Does that make sense?
I guess I can't visualize where that would be.
You've got either guest parking or additional parking next to the drive aisle.
What's that?
Yeah. You've got about 10 spots next to the drive aisle.
Correct. So we have all the parking on this side, and then on this side where the rain garden is, that could potentially be more parking.
So that's where proof of parking is?
Correct.
You'd lose the rain garden?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think we'd have like one more off to the side too.
Okay. So stormwater, right now, you're relying on green space and the rain garden.
We have a system underneath the parking lot as well.
Okay, and I remember you said that earlier, so what kind of a system is that?
I'm gonna look to my landscape architect to answer that.
Yeah, because this is an area where water does gather along that west side of France.
Good evening, my name's Charles Stewart, landscape architect, Kimley Horn in St. Paul. Address 767 Eustis Street. We moved a year ago, so it's hard for me to remember at times. So related to stormwater, we're meeting 9 Mile Creek Watershed District's goals for stormwater infiltration and treatment. And so the main kind of generator of that is the underground stormwater system. It's we'll call it a chamber system. for lack of a better term that way. So water comes in through the system. It actually, and that's why with the rain garden, we're doing some pre-treatment and infiltration there, and then it'll enter into the chamber system. It'll get put back into the system.
All right. Thank you. That's what I have. Oh, no. We have routinely approved projects with fewer parking places than our ordinance calls for. And I've become aware just in the last couple of months where in one of the developments, people are trying to find places to park because the parking is full. So I'm concerned about that. I haven't been concerned about it because, oh, no, it's plenty of parking, it's plenty of parking. Well, with extra vehicles, with other things that people like to store in a parking place, like a boat, and I realize that might not happen here. However, we are seeing situations where while we were told we wouldn't be underparked, we are finding ourselves underparked. So I'm just, that's why I asked about the proof of parking, and I am concerned about it, hoping that, is it 83? I can't remember what it is. But anyway, the number of parking places here.
So it's 88 with approved, but it's 64 underneath and then 10 So it's 64 underneath and then 12 on one side.
And then proof of
Okay.
parking 12.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
So, so we'll have 76. Yes. So,
Okay.
I mean, that was our valid point, especially it being a family building, that families aren't going to take transit. They have kids. That's just not the system that we have in the Twin Cities. And so that is something that we push for our family buildings, is having one-to-one parking. And so that's what we made sure to have here, is that we have one-to-one
Okay.
parking.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions at this point in time? I mentioned I had a couple. Ms. Gould, why don't you stay here? Do you recall, you mentioned that you were trying to comply with the design guidelines, the design experience guidelines as you were moving along through the project. So I'm wondering if you recall, and maybe this is a better question for Director Teague, what was the status of the design guidelines at the time of the purchase of the property?
We knew basic principles and kind of where we were headed, but they weren't completed. We didn't know the details. Mick's latest memo outlines very detailed standards. We did not know those at that time.
Yeah. That was my recollection too, is that we didn't have those design experience guidelines approved by the council yet.
Yeah, with the comp plan amendment, we came in through, I think it was October 2018 last year, so just about a year ago, and they weren't to that level.
Okay. Director Teague, this one's for you. I'm looking at the proposed resolution, and then I get this 2019-100, and I get down to the conditions. The proposed approval is subject to the following conditions, and then the last two conditions are using language I don't know if I've ever seen before. It doesn't say this is a condition. It says we're asking you to consider the design experience guidelines. We're asking you to consider the city sustainability manager's comments, and it's like making a good faith effort to take a look at those things. If they work, try to incorporate them. If they don't, that's not going to be a hard and fast condition. Is that a fair way to interpret the use of the word consideration?
That is fair, and it's due to the nature of the affordable housing project. I think with the sustainability recommendations, by the time we get to, well, actually with both of these, at final approval, we would have those nailed down for what they can and can't do.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. And you agree with that, Ms. Gould? That analysis of those two issues?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had. Member Staunton, did you have any questions, or you want to wait till we get to comments? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ms. Gould.
Thank you.
Okay, we've closed the public hearing. There's a couple of different proposed actions here on this project. And I think people that are supportive of it have spoken very eloquently about why we should be thinking about it for these 70 units of permanent affordable housing in our city. We've got Resolution 2019-100, which I just talked a little bit about, and then there's Ordinance 2019-17, which would do a preliminary rezoning from PID to PUD, and there would be, Director Teague, you've asked for a first reading on ordinance number 2019-17. Is that the way you prefer that be handled, as opposed to a waiver of second reading?
Correct. Correct. This would just be first reading.
Okay. All right. And Attorney Knudsen, those two matters could be handled in a single motion?
Mayor, that is correct. One motion is fine.
Okay. For purposes of discussion, is there anyone that wants to make that motion to adopt Resolution 2019-100, which would approve preliminary rezoning and preliminary development plan, and then grant first reading to Ordinance 2019-17, which would establish the PUD zoning district for 4100 West 76th Street for Aon?
So moved.
Second? All right, we got a motion and a second, and now discussion. Thoughts? Member Staunton, is this when you wanted to give us your comments? I think probably so.
So I think it's a great project, a great applicant. I have to say, I don't agree with the comments that Ms. Melton made with respect to treating the kind of built form differently. I think what we want to do is create a built form that you can't tell the difference, and I think you're well on your way to doing that. I have some sympathy for the notion that when you started down this path, we hadn't firmed up these requirements. The things that I'm concerned about, and I'm going to encourage the applicant to really work on between now and the final plan, and I like the language that the Director of Planning has put into this and the Planning Commission has put into this. The parking in the front I'm struggling with. I think as we're trying to create the environment we're trying to create, we don't want to have that surface parking in the front of the building. So if it has to be in the front, figuring out ways to mask it or screen it would be really helpful. I'm not as concerned about the all stone on the front of the building. I think it's fine to have the stone on the first level and the glass up above. I think having the building at 30 feet does create these street rooms we've talked about in the design experience guidelines, and I think that's kind of important as opposed to having it set way back. The stormwater, I don't feel strongly about whether that's in the front or the back. In terms of the solar, I would suggest you think about whether you might be able to do a solar garden on the rooftop. The advantage of that is you don't have to mess with it. It's not going to add to your cost. In fact, it might add a little bit of revenue from leasing the rooftop to a solar garden developer. That's a way to be able to accomplish an aggregate contribution to sustainable energy without having to really go through the expense or the maintenance or the monitoring yourself. So the big thing for me is that parking in the front. I'd like to see a way to put it in the back. I like the pedestrian bike path through. I'm not sure how that's going to fit into the greater scheme. It is, as you look at it on the map, it's a little bit further west than where we kind of have it envisioned, so it may be that it's not necessary to that infrastructure. But I like having that ability to go from the front of the back and marrying that up with what might happen to the north of the property in the future. So the big thing for me as we move from the first stage to the final stage would be the parking, moving the parking to the back.
Thank you. Member Fisher?
So I feel like I'm way more familiar with this project than I would be normally. It's like, wow, this is really only the preliminary. But I think part of it is because we've seen it come before us a number of times. And I do believe that it's really quite well done. And this balance that we're trying to achieve here, while I agree with many of your comments, and frankly, I appreciated Mick Johnson's comments about, all of how it would kind of follow the letter of the law, as it will, with the design guidelines or the experience guidelines. But the fact is they weren't in place early on, and the unique situation here is that the funding process for these projects is so rigid and takes so long that this isn't the kind of thing where you can just turn around and say, oh yeah, we're going to change, we're going to have a $500,000 shift in funding. That would create somewhat of a nightmare here. So I'm trying to find the right kind of landing place for that. And I actually feel like this really does follow the spirit of our Southdale planning. And in a way, you're sort of, it's this affordability, the workforce housing, all of those things, as opposed to sort of all of the physical requirements and trying to find the right balance. I actually would be a little concerned at this point, at this stage, trying to maneuver to get the parking in the back. I think it's more difficult than it might seem. And so I would be interested how you do it, screen it, use some sort of the landscape, and work around that a little bit and just see if you can make that, create an edge or something that way. But for the most part, I really think this is a great project. And I don't believe anybody's ever going to walk by, drive by, bicycle by this project and say, boy, that must be an affordable housing project, because it really is going to be great. It's going to look great, and it's going to provide such a wonderful opportunity for our community. That's all.
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you. My comments probably fall somewhere between Member Fisher and Member Staunton in that we asked Mick Johnson to come in and make recommendations based on the plan that was in front of him. So I hate to just move away from that, or even for that matter, consider that a nonprofit should be treated unequally. I also recognize that we are in a funding issue and timing issue. Still, if this extended the completion of the project by considering some of Mr. Johnson's recommendations by 6 months or some period of time, the building's going to be there for a very long time. And it's in a very visible, very well situated location. I officed next door to that building, or a building away, for 20 years. So I think that it's going to wind up being important visually. So to the degree possible, and that's why I appreciate the consideration insertion into the resolution, because to the degree possible, especially with regard to the parking, if it's possible to move things around, it seems as if that would be well advised. We're not there yet. We're not into a final setting. But I do think that's important. And I guess the last comment on the building itself is the considered public art that memorializes the nature of the site is, I think that's important. It's kind of a piece of our legacy in our town. That was a significant recording studio. Janet Jackson had her big album there. Jimmy Jam's work there is almost legendary, what occurred there in that studio. So to note that, to commemorate that in some way, I think would be useful. And if there's a funding issue of some dollars at the end, maybe we can figure out a way to meet that. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Brindle.
Thank you. I read Mick Johnson's letter a couple of times, and there's 2 letters from him. And the earlier letter actually talks about the 2 faces of the building that are more visible from the street. being treated differently than the faces of the building that aren't so visible from the street. And I read that and I went, no, I don't think so, because redevelopment is going to happen on other sides of this building, and it needs to be attractive and uniform. I read that and I sort of put his letter aside and said, you know, I really need to just look at this for the merits of what is being accomplished here. And I really do think it's an attractive building. I think that the way the landscaping is laid out is balanced. It looks great. The parking in front does not bother me. It creates activity, and I think I like that part of it. I really, that doesn't bother me at all. I would, if there is any other location for proof of parking, I would like to preserve the rain garden, should additional parking become necessary. But I understand there's only so much space on a 3-acre piece of property. So, is that how much this is, 3 acres? I don't even know.
2, I think, yeah, 2.
2? All right, I didn't think I was right. But anyway, thank you for working with us on this and in making this a beautiful site that I think people are going to enjoy for a long, long time.
This reminds me a bit of when we were in the process of creating our affordable housing policy, and folks had purchased the Titus property and the property where Aria is now, the old Best Buy site. And so we made some accommodation because they had committed to those land prices of not imposing the affordable housing policy on those 2 developers, but instead using the kind of the bully pulpit to get them to do some affordable, but understanding that if the policy had been in place beforehand, it might have been a whole different kind of dialogue or negotiation that had gone on with respect to the acquisition of the property, because they would have had certain obligations under the affordable housing policy. Well, here we got a situation in my mind where the design experience guidelines are not fully in place, not adopted by the council, and Aon's making a good faith effort to address these issues as they're going along. And I think they've done a really superb job of doing that. And I also say this, these are guidelines. They're not mandates, they're not rules. And Mitt Johnson is not the final arbiter of everything that gets built in Edina. In fact, I don't agree with some of the stuff that he's done or recommended to us, because I think the playground is in a far superior location where it is on the site plan than to cram it off to the side at half the size. So you get that tree stand behind the building right now, and then you've got a really big playground back there. And it just seems like a natural sort of fit to me. So, and the parking, I think, is an issue, and the $500,000 that would be involved in trying to rejig this project to, I don't want to tank this project over some guidelines when they are precisely that, guidelines. So I don't necessarily agree, like Member Brindle said, with his first recommendations on his first letter. I don't agree with some of the recommendations he's made on the second letter. It's our decision at the end of the day what we're going to do here. I think generally those guidelines have been followed, and I think for purposes of moving forward, it's good to take to heart the conditions 13 and 14, which are consideration of sustainability issues and consideration of the guidelines as they exist today. Do the best you can with them, with the financing you're going to be able to achieve. Come back to us for final, and we'll see where we are. But I'm comfortable going forward right now as well. We've got a motion and a second. I think with respect to the resolution 2019-100 and ordinance 2019-17. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion as originally stated, say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. All right. We're on to the next phase. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. All right, and next we're going to move on to reports and recommendations, because we are now finished with the public hearing portion of the agenda, and in the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda, We have one matter, and Heidi Lee, our Race and Equity Coordinator, is going to address the council on a recommendation they have for looking at artwork and decor in city facilities that would be reflective of, I guess, the ever-increasing diversity and race and culture, our tip of the hat to the past and thinking about the future. So, Ms. Lee, welcome. Well, nice to have you in front of us this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I appreciate your time tonight. I would like to provide a staff recommendation for the Human Rights and Relations Commission Work Plan Initiative to have city facility and artwork and decor reflect the diversity of race and culture in Edina. But first off, I would like to actually thank the commissioners from the Arts and Culture Commission, as well as the Heritage Preservation Commission and the Human Rights and Relations Commission, who gave their time to this initiative as well. So what you have in front of you in your packet provides a recommendation that the Cross Commission provided with the focus on the Mayor's Conference Room, as well as the atrium entryway for City Hall. And their observations are based on discussions when they met at these two locations. And so the cross-commission work is a great starting point and should be translated into a rubric that can be used for the artwork and decor in all city facilities. The rubric would have elements that would be assessed, such as the feeling of the location and how it conveys to the visitor, which is one of the questions the cross-commissions asked during their visit of the Mayor's Conference Room, as well as the entryway. And so creating a rubric that provides tangible data of the city's facility artwork and decor will provide a standard in how to determine if the artwork and decor reflects the diversity and race in Edina, as well as to create a plan and how to implement that change. And so the recommendation is to have the creation of the rubric in the 2020 Human Rights and Relations Commission work plan. And again, that information is in your packet. So that is all I have. Is there any questions that you may have?
Questions for Ms. Lee? Member Brindle.
So this starts with the Mayor's Conference Room and where else?
The entryway.
Oh, and okay.
The entryway for City Hall.
All right. So I have been spending time in other city halls, going to other meetings. And at Minnetonka City Hall, there is, there's this, it sort of looks like a wall, but it's full of photographs. And it's really cool. And it's all residents doing all sorts of things around the city. And in Bloomington, it's similar, and they have these boards that are kind of at angles to each other down the middle of the area. So when I read this, I thought, oh well, maybe we could bring in some of that. Mm-hmm. But that's what struck me when I read this. But I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other comments? So, I generally like the notion of it. I don't necessarily agree with some of the things the Cross Commission has said about City Hall and the entry. And this is where you get into all that subjectivity and mm-hmm. talk about feel. I mean, they say that the entryway here feels cold and sterile. To me, when I come in here, I see beautiful stone and warm wood, and I see some hard surfaces, but the way the architects did this, I think it's really quite beautiful, and it's not cold to me. And so when I think about, well, what would we do in here, and how would we decide who does what in here? Could you address that issue? I mean, so if I kind of get the idea of the mural in the mayor's conference room on the wall. That seems pretty intriguing to me, but I'm concerned about the architectural integrity of what we have out in the foyer. Mm-hmm. And I would like to know, or I'd like the council to decide what goes where. If somebody comes back with a plan, it's not just a cross commission deciding, well, we're gonna put this here and we're gonna put that there. And like when the stained glass was put in City Hall years and years ago, there was a determination made by the council, A, to approve the stained glass, and B, to approve its location. And I think that's what ought to be happening here. Mm-hmm. So maybe that is what you're intending, but I don't know. Could you speak to that concern?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons why to be able to have a rubric which does have future elements of that rubric. So thinking about is there accurate representation of the diversity that we have in Edina? Is the representation accurate as well? And then what is the feel? So those are just 3 examples of elements that would be on the rubric. And they would then be able to create a plan based on just this assessment. And then create a plan of what are some of the artwork or decor that could be placed on that. So it would be their recommendation. Ultimately, with the creation of the rubric, it would be something that the staff members could use to be able to assess what is the artwork and decor, and then ultimately the decision-making as far as where the location would be and who would be commissioned to create that would ultimately fall on council.
Okay, all right. And so some of these could be permanent in nature, some could be temporary, I suppose. Like we've got an event, we've got Days of Remembrance, and we want to put up some things that are both outside the building and inside the building. Is that accurate, that some things would be temporary in nature, some things might be permanent in nature?
That hasn't been decided at this
Okay.
time as far as what is the lifespan of art and decor that would be placed on certain locations, but that
Okay.
certainly could be something that they think about when they are creating a plan.
So they create the plan, it comes to staff, and then it comes through staff to the council? Okay, well then I'm getting way ahead of myself, aren't I? All right,
Steps
okay.
first.
That's helpful for me. Yeah.
If I could jump in.
Yes.
It strikes me that what dovetails with this is we've had some discussions about potential remodeling of the space as well, and maybe those kinds of these design thoughts go hand in hand with one another as I know the work session we had about particularly this entryway space and how to use it in a different manner and redesign it in a different manner goes to how we engage the public, but it seems like you're talking a lot about how we engage the public too in a more kind of what kind of place are we creating and how do people feel when they come into this place? Do they feel like it's their home as well as our home? So I like the way you're thinking. I think the mayor's conference room in particular is long overdue for a makeover. And I appreciate the effort, like you said, that these commission members have put in, and I think we should move ahead.
Okay, good. You want to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second. All right, we've got a motion second to adopt a recommendation for city facility artwork and decor to reflect diversity, race, and culture. The motion would approve the recommendation for the Human Rights and Relations Commission, Art and Culture Commission, and Heritage Preservation Commission to create a rubric to assess how artwork and decor reflects the diversity of race and culture in city facilities. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right,
Thank you.
very good. Thank you. Correspondence and petitions. Anything we need to know about other than what was on the dais?
Nothing more than that.
Okay, thank you. Aviation noise update, Member Brindle?
Okay, here I am. Okay, so not much has changed. We've gotten mail. There are people in our city and west of our city who are concerned about airport noise, so we continue to be reminded that people are concerned and want us to address those concerns. The next meeting of the Noise Oversight Committee is scheduled for November 20th at 6 p.m. at the MAC. This is our evening meeting of the year. This meeting is also during the National League of Cities Conference. And so the NOC, the people who sit on the NOC are elected representatives from various cities as well as people in the aviation industry. And so since it has we've become aware that some of the city officials are going to be at the conference, we're looking at whether the meeting can be held at that time. For now, if you're interested in that meeting, hold November 20th on your calendar, but know that we just might come with a different date if in fact we don't end up with a quorum.
Okay. All right, good. Manager Neal, anything in addition to that on aviation noise?
Nothing more.
Okay. And Mayor and council comments. Member Fisher.
Jennifer, could you bring up the slides? So what I want to talk about is something that just came up today, and it's actually caused me to be really distracted tonight. I feel like I haven't maybe engaged the way I sometimes do, because it's just very troubling to me. And this goes back to a letter that our mayor wrote in the Star Tribune on October 31st. And I have to tell you, I read that letter and I was very proud of you as a leader in our community, because I feel like at a very contentious time, a lot of stress in our community over the school board election, I felt like you found sort of a middle ground. I don't think you tried to pick candidates on one side or the other, but you really tried to send a message, which is a leadership message, about how we talk about our community. In this case, it was about the school district. But in your last paragraph, I'm going to quote you. You said, "The attempt by some in our community to mislead voters with ill-founded fears and distorted facts should not be the new standard." And I think that's an important message. And you know, we get a lot of information sent to us quite often, and I've oftentimes commented that, well, that seems to be, you know, there seems to be misinformation. That's just a term I use a lot. But some folks took exception to the mayor's letter, and there was a letter in the paper today, and I just want to highlight the part in red where it references a retreat that the city council had this past summer, where we identified Edina residents as a threat to our livable city strategy. And then it repeats it, yes, a threat. That's what we said. And it's actually exactly what the mayor was talking about. It's a distortion of something that happened. And it's a very careful, well thought out use of words to send a message, to get a reaction, to achieve a certain goal. And that's really troubling to me. Could you go to the next slide? So our retreat that this refers to was in March. It was 2 days where this council and our staff met, and we had a consultant helping facilitate, and it's basically a budget planning session. And we talked about 4 key goals that we align our budget around. One, so first is strong foundation, which is maintaining physical assets and infrastructure. 2, reliable service, which is maintaining service levels that best meet community needs. 3, livable city, which is a plan for a connected and sustainable development. And that's one I'm going to talk about a little bit, because that's the one that was being referenced in particular. But for the 4th one is better together, fostering an inclusive and engaged community. These are the 4 pillars that we try to set our budget around. We don't just randomly do a budget. We're trying to achieve goals for our community. So these 4 particular people that signed this letter and very intentionally wrote these words were referring to one part of our retreat, which is the focus on livable city. So I just wanted people to see what livable city, what that goal is about. And it is a plan for connected and sustainable development. And if you go to the next slide, we do what we call the SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Anyone that's taken a single business class, actually anyone that's gone through high school, should know what a SWOT analysis is. So when you use the word threat in the context that they did, completely out of context, that's a very intentional act. And it's exactly what the mayor was talking about. So if you go to the next slide, this is, and by the way, this is all part of a 13-page document, which our staff did, or I don't know if it was staff or consultant or both, documented sort of the discussion that was happening in the retreat. And if you look in the lower quadrant under threats, we talked about economy. Now, threats to livable city, which again is this, I talked about what the definition of that is. We talk about economy, perception that the city is driving development versus regulating development, and then opposition to density and affordable housing. When you talk about livable cities, and we're talking about housing for all, clearly a threat to that goal would be people that don't want housing for all or affordable housing. There's nothing about our citizens or the folks in Edina being a threat to the council or anyone else. You have to have these things in context. And I guess I can't tell people how to feel about this, but what I would ask is that rather than what seems to be the pattern, is somebody they lob something out there, and the reaction on social media is immediate, take an opinion, take a stand, and doggone it, what's wrong with those people? Hey, if you don't like something I do, that's okay. But base it on what I really said. Base it on what I really did. These are really hardworking people up here, and they're working really hard for the betterment of this community. And it's just where we're going in this country, and I'm seeing it in our town, is just not a good place. Just give people the benefit of the doubt that maybe, whether they're running for school board, or they're on a city council, or they're on our commissions, that they're residents, they live here, and they're trying to make the community better. It's that simple, right? And what I would ask everyone to do is read all 13 pages of this document. And it really will give you actually some context about the full discussion, not one word that you pull out and lob out there in the Star Tribune. And you'll see a lot in there about ethics. And I would suggest the same people that are writing this stuff in the Star Tribune are challenging us. You need an ethics policy. You know what? I think everybody should be ethical in their communication and what they're doing. I think that would be great for our town. I also want to point out something. On the far right quadrant under threats, now that's for better together. That's how we work together as a community. What are the threats that we talked about? Misinformation and communication fatigue. I'm tired of the stuff I see every day in my email because people are reacting to false information. I've actually been chewed out by folks on Nextdoor because I've used the term misinformation. That's insulting. They're not misinformed. What's my other alternative? To say it's a lie? I guess I could be more straightforward and just say it's not misinformation, it's deliberate. National and partisan divides creeping into local issues. That's exactly, again, what the mayor was talking about. We can do better, and we should do better. And I don't want in any way to think that I don't want to take criticism. If I'm doing something wrong, if you don't like something I voted on, by all means, I should be subject to criticism, to second guess, whatever. That's what we're here for, right? That's part of our job. But let's be ethical, let's be truthful, let's put context into things, and I think we'll be in a much better place. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Member Staunton. Thank you, Member Fisher.
Good on you, Mike Fisher. I couldn't agree more. And I think people ought to take down the names of the folks who were authoring that letter and note that when they speak in the future, you need to check the facts. So, on a different note, I wanted to talk about an election we had in our town last night and congratulate the 3 winners of the school board election race. But I also wanted to thank all 7 people who decided to run. Those of us who sit up here on this dais know what it's like to run for office, know what a sacrifice it is for you and your family, and all to make your community better. And I think all 7 of those folks were interested in making their community better, felt strongly enough about it that they were willing to run for office, spent the time and energy and just aggravation to try to do that. And I want to applaud all 7 folks who chose to make that sacrifice. And then I'd like to also specifically recognize Sarah Patzloff and Amir Garby. Amir served for the last 4 years on the school board and chose not to run for re-election. And Sarah has served for 8 years and will finish her service up at the end of the year. And again, those are people who made great sacrifice individually and for their families, and in order to make our community a better place. And whether you agree with what they've done or not, whether you agree with what the folks who were elected last night have done or not, all of these are folks who are really putting it on the line to make their community a better place, and I think they deserve the credit and the gratitude from all of us in the community. So I wanted Mr. Mayor to take the time tonight to make sure and thank all those folks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Member Brindle.
Two more congratulations on last night, and they have to do with people in Bloomington. But thank you for acknowledging school board. And thanks to all the, by the way, all the election judges who spend their time on election day and the training prior to that, and doing their jobs and doing their jobs well to make it possible for all of us to go to the polls and vote. But also, two congratulations to people, one person re-elected in Bloomington, Councilmember Dwayne Lohman. I serve with him on the Noise Oversight Committee and at the airport. And then a big congratulations to a new mayor of Bloomington, Tim Bussey. So Mayor Winstead has been in his position and re-elected for 20 years or more?
20 years.
Yeah, and so Tim has been on the 494 Commission, so I've served with him there. So I'm very happy to see strong leadership in Bloomington continue.
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you. It's interesting to be the fourth guy in the lineup here tonight because it's been fascinating to kind of see reactions, and there's really so much of it is based on the election last night. My observation on that is just this: that it seems to me as if what has been occurring in the course of this election is a lot of pulling apart, and I'm hoping that we can now begin to pull together, because I think the most important thing that needs to happen here in our city is that we kind of dismiss the partisanship, that we can kind of dismiss the colors, the red and the blue and just accept green. And that should be our currency. And if we can do that, then I think we're going to make a lot more progress and resolve the issues that we face and continue to make our town, which is what every single one of these candidates were working on last night, and every single one of us behind this dais have worked on in terms of getting here and making a contribution to make this a better place to live. So thanks for all your comments. And I hope that we can now begin to just bring this to an end and say, let's pull together, let's make progress, let's move forward. If we can do it together, we'll be better as a town and better as a community.
And that's why we have you as the closer. That's really here. I love that.
Yeah, that's good. I concur. Yeah, I think that this we've got a common view here. I think in our community that the school district, our education system is kind of the heart and soul of our town, and everybody cares about it. Everyone wants it to be the best. Everybody wants I think somebody said earlier, everybody wants their child nurtured in that school system, and everybody wants to have every child have the best chance at academic success on the way to an economic future. So when I watched the candidate forum live here in council chambers, I thought they were all good candidates in their own way, their own view of how to get how to maintain that standard of excellence. And we've got some new folks to work with. I appreciate everybody's comments, and I would join Member Staunton in recognizing Amir Garby and Sarah Patzloff, who's been in front of us many times. And her heart was in this work, and she did a very, very nice job in our community for 8 years. So back to the comment that Member Anderson made. You know, I went over and visited with the principals a little bit today, and they're feeling too, I think, in the system, this sense of divisiveness that's occurred, and this is the most contentious school district election I've seen. And I think this idea of getting back to this big tent idea that we're all in this together, as you said so adroitly, I think we're all green, you know. With the school district, we're all green. And so I'm hoping that what we can do here is we can all move forward together. If people have concerns that they want to express, we need to have a venue for that. Some way, somehow, we need to be able to have people express what they're concerned about, what they're worried about, what they want to make sure their kids are able to do. Because school's not for politics, school's for educating kids, and kids deserve better than to be the subject of politics. So I'm hopeful too that we can figure out a way to all move forward together here after we get things settled down here a little bit from the election. The only other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was, I think all of you knew this, that the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National Endowment for the Arts runs this program together called the City Design Institute, and many cities have gone there over the years. You get invited, and it's paid for by the City Design Institute folks and the National Endowment for the Arts, I presume. I was picked in this last go-around, this last session. There were regional meetings, and this one happened to be in New York. We were in Brooklyn, and it was sponsored out there by what they call the Van Allen Institute. But we had our meetings. We got there on a Wednesday afternoon, and then we spent the balance of that afternoon as it moved towards darkness down at the Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is just an extraordinary park that they've created in Brooklyn. And then the next day we started our meetings, and I was eager to tell Member Fisher about this in particular because we were at, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's the Bjorn Ingvals Group from Copenhagen. BIG, they're called, is their acronym. And we weren't allowed to take any photos in there. They were working on number 2, I think they're in the ground on this now, number 2 World Trade Center. They were doing the headquarters for Google, a new headquarters, and they had mock-ups of the new headquarters for Lego in Copenhagen. There were some fascinating looking architectural things around. And so there were, I think, 7 of us mayors there. They came out to Edina and looked at all the different possibilities for a project, because you have to come with a project. And we picked with their help, we picked the library site on 70th and York. And then had a presentation about our town and what some of the issues were around that site. And that was all interesting. And somebody recorded all those comments while I was making the presentation by the people that were there, all the mayors and the design professionals. The first person we heard one from was a woman named Margie Ruddick, who runs a company called Margie Ruddick Landscape and Design, and she talked about Governor's Island, the Brooklyn Bridge Park, Coney Island, work they're doing on the Harlem River project. And some of the things that she talked about were things that I think that would have some applicability to what we might be doing at Fred Richards with respect to social spaces, programming, gardening, the things that people want to do in the park. And they found that a lot of those folks out east want not only to be able to garden, but pollinating and beekeeping has become quite a popular thing in those urban environments. And then Bloomberg Philanthropies talked about a new program they had called Asphalt Art, and I did send the information on that on to Scott Neal, and I think he sent it on to the director of our art center to take a look at that to see if that was something that worked for us. And I think the general notion around these parks was that you frame it around health. And so, there were just a lot of good thoughts and the use of language that I thought were very helpful. There were mayors there from Union City, Georgia. I'm just looking at my notes quickly. fellow there that was one of the design experts, had run the Office of Neighborhood Strategies for Bloomberg when he was mayor. And then he was now out in Santa Fe. There is a plan in New York called the Neighborhood Planning Playbook, and I think we'll try to get our hands on that. Might be helpful. And they were talking about some of the keys in working with residents, transparency, clarity, collaboration, those kinds of things we work on relative to parks. And something he was working on in Santa Fe and creating a park hub in a new location. So it just, I mean, it kind of went on and on. All these mayors had interesting projects. The design professionals were first rate. Some of the, like, I was just thinking of the mayor of Hollywood, Florida. He's got this beautiful beach, and he's got a problem with the properties adjoining the beach because they got FEMA challenges. They got to be 6 to 8 feet above the floodplain when they rebuild buildings, and they got all these old Art Deco buildings that need to be rehabbed, but what are they going to do? And so, or out in Maricopa, Arizona, it's southwest of Phoenix. It's a town that didn't exist until 16 years ago, and they've already got 35,000 people there. But they're right in the middle of test tracks for Volkswagen, for Nissan. There's a new electric car manufacturer coming there to compete with Tesla. There's a new electric pickup truck manufacturer coming into their neighborhood. And we told the mayor, why don't you become the techno hub of Arizona, and make sure that you become as sustainable and green as you can possibly get. Run everything off solar. You got 300 days of sunshine a year out there. And so I think a lot of people left with some really good ideas. So all in all, it was a really great experience. Thankful to the Van Allen Institute and the National Endowment for the Arts for allowing me to be included. And I think all of these things help you be a better mayor or a better council member, whether you're going to the National League of Cities or something like this, or even the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So that was maybe a little bit more information than you wanted, but it was an interesting experience. So I'm really grateful for that. What else we have coming up this week? Tomorrow morning, the Chamber has a session on well-being over at the Westin. I think the Greater MSP annual meeting is next week, and other things going on for us as well. So, but that's it for me. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Two things from me. One is just to note that the third quarter quarterly business report is included in the packet tonight. The best summary of that report that's written by our finance director, Mr. Urim, is the first sentence of it. Overall, Q3 is consistent with previous years and is performing as expected. It's about as concise as one can get to describe the operations of the city. The other thing I'll note for you is that in the last couple of weeks, the United States Environmental Protection Agency has issued its national priority list, which is where they list sites that they would like to include as part of their Superfund program. And as we all know, there is a site on that list that includes geography that's both in St. Louis Park and Edina. We have been talking with EPA and MPCA officials about that proposal. They have proposed it. It will go into a process of taking public comment at some point before it's finalized. But we have been invited by Representative Adelson and Senator Franzen to host to join them in hosting a joint public meeting for residents who are interested in learning more about that entire process. They have secured speakers from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to come and do a presentation and answer questions in this room in the council chambers on Wednesday, November 20th at 6:30 p.m. So we just we'll do some additional public engagement, public notification about that. But that was something they thought was important, and so we joined them with hosting that opportunity.
I think the addition of Edina that we did really addressed this issue well. And is that online as well as it was mailed also to people's homes, I think, and it was really a superbly done piece by our communications department, I think.
Agreed. And still relevant, right? So everything in that is
Yeah.
still as relevant as it was when we sent that out a month ago.
Right.
And that's all I've got. Thank you.
And I assume that's posted on our website, easily accessible if somebody can't get their hands on it in their mail or in their email?
Sure
Where would they
is.
go? To the website and
For free.
look for Edition Edina?
Yeah.
Okay,
Even better, you can go to edinamn.gov/water.
very good, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, and did that prompt anything from anyone else on the council? All right, very good. Thanks for all those great comments this evening, and good work. We stand adjourned.